Yo, what is going on, everyone? I am back with another review video. It is going to be on my X2 regular version and the mini size. And in all honesty, these mice were very hard for me to get used to. I thought it was going to be a much safer shape than I had initially thought, but I will get into the shape a bit later. And as per usual, I just want to make sure that I can get out the features first and then talk about the shape analysis and compare it to other mice on the market, just so I can just bang it out really quickly and it'll be a lot faster video. So first off, the clicks. Honestly, I feel like have gotten a little bit better from my initial impressions. My initial impressions were really negative, in all honesty. I did feel like the clicks were very, very lifeless and dull. And using them, and there is one mouse that I want to compare it to specifically later, that these clicks do feel better than that mouse. However, they're using Kale 8.0s, and always use the standard of the XM1R from Endgame Gear as the main standard for how Kale 8.0 should be implemented, and these don't do it justice. These honestly just feel like Omrons. They don't feel like Kale switches at all, but they aren't that bad as I had initially thought in my review. There's not a whole lot of post travel, like all of that is post travel. And there isn't like that much pre-travel either. That's pre-travel right there, and then click, and then the post-travel. So overall, the clicks aren't that bad. It's just not that good. For $95, I feel like the clicks should be implemented much better. And then the next thing is the scroll wheel. It literally just feels like a GPX scroll wheel. There's nothing fancy or really nice feeling about this scroll wheel. If you like the GPX, you will like this one. It does feel a little bit more tactile than the GPX, but it is like that same like really generic like okay feeling scroll wheel, but I do like it better than some other mice I've tried. I like it a lot better than the MM712 I just reviewed. This is a lot better because I can feel every step. Next thing are the side buttons. Honestly, I feel like they're decent. Like, I don't think they're very thick, but they aren't hard to hit. They're very, very easy to hit, especially for where my thumb rests. It's actually going to be right in the middle of both side buttons. So honestly, for a somewhat relaxed claw, I feel like this is a very, very good position for the side buttons. And then these actually do feel pretty good. I will actually give Pulsar props here. They finally opted for regular feeling switches, which is great, but they did them pretty well, honestly. For the amount of mice that I've been testing and the amount of like bad side buttons where I can just press it so far into the shell, you can still press it into the shell, but not as deep as other buttons. But they are using a 3395 sensor, and it performs really well. It has motion sync that you are able to put on through the software that they provide, and I don't fully notice a difference. To be completely honest, I don't notice a difference between motion sync on or off at 1K hertz, but I do notice a difference between 1, 2K, and 4K hertz. And I also think the position is great, especially for claw. Like I said in my previous video, wherever these three fingers, your thumb, ring, and pinky, are going to rest on the mouse, I feel like that is where you would want the sensor to be for claw, not for fingertip. I feel like for fingertip, you'd want a more forward position, maybe somewhere up here. But directly in the middle is very, very good for claw, and it feels really, really nice, I will be completely honest. The next thing I want to talk about are these stock skates, and these are some of the absolute worst stock skates I have ever used. They are incredibly slow. I don't understand how they're so slow, because these do not feel like the X-Lite ones. Maybe it's, I don't know, a weight difference between the X2 and the X-Lites, but the X-Lite stock skates felt way better than whatever they're using here. I literally have to use an MPC 450 or a Sky pad. I have to use a really fast pad for me to actually enjoy these skates, which is such... It's just such a negative, honestly. I used it on a Raiden and it felt really nice. I used it on a Heian and it felt really nice. But if I used it on like something like the Infinity Mice Dual, it was too slow. It felt so bad, especially for the dynamic friction. If I was using a like heavy control pad, it felt like it was like tugging every time I would move the mouse, which is a big reason why I never liked using it. I don't like feet that don't perform well on control pads, because I feel like the mass majority of people are still using control pads. So if the stock skates suck on them, it's really hard to recommend it. It's also worse for me because I still love control pads, and not being able to use it just because of the mouse skates is such a hindrance to me. And that's also very strange because you normally with heavier skates, I can get away with it if the mouse is light, much like the X2 coming in at 56 grams, which is very impressive. I will say that Pulsar has done an incredible job at maintaining a low weight on all of their mice so far. And for no holes on the shell itself and just this cool looking bottom plate, I think it's incredible the amount of weight they were able to shave off, because this thing is built like a goddamn tank. In the original like X-Lite V1 that I had, that mouse I could easily crush. However, the X-Lite V2 was incredibly built, and I can say the exact same for the X2. I've had these since my initial impressions video, and I think it's been around 3 to 4 months, and these have not degraded in build quality at all. I'm very impressed with the build quality. And now in terms of the main differences between the regular and the mini. I know in my initial impressions I did say I prefer the regular. However, there is a big thing that hinders me from loving this one more than the mini. And because of the narrow width and the lack of length on this mouse, it is actually very hard for me to get a stable, consistent grip. However, if I pincer claw and use the inside of my hand muscles here for the main point, because normally I would use my fingertips on these three as like my main grip, I wouldn't really use my inner hand muscles, but I do have to for the mini, and it feels much better. It feels so much more comfortable, and I'm able to use this mouse for a longer period of time than the regular. And the main reason I can't use the regular is it's honestly just too wide. If it wasn't this wide, but it kept the same back hump and length, it would be an amazing shape. The other thing too is because of the lack of back flare, which I was very heavily invested in my initial impressions, is it is really hard to just pull the mouse into my palm, which is normally what I do for all mice. So I really appreciate a nice prominent back flare or very nice side curvature, which this mouse doesn't have either of. However, that's not to say mice that have that can't do it, because you can see here for the Bolt, it has a very prominent back flare, but it's a pretty much flat-sided mouse, if I'm completely honest. But this is so much more comfortable in terms of shape alone. And because of the shape on the back hump, it feels like a tennis ball in my hand. And what that does is it feels more stable, and it also feels more comfortable, and it fills this entire like middle to bottom portion of my palm, which is exactly what I look for in shapes, just for it to be comfortable for claw. But I feel like this is more similar to the GPX, where the bottom flare is not as prominent and these sides are also very straight, but there is some side curvature to the G Pro. And with the G Pro, it still feels better because of how rounded and egg-like the back is. It still fills my palm a lot better. It's not as comfortable as the X2 in terms of like the back hump, in my opinion. It feels very similar, but it's not as comfortable. But the main issue is the width. So I have to grip it, and when I do press into it with my fingertips, I force my muscles to clench up, which makes it very uncomfortable. And that's what I noticed when I was first using this mouse, is I love the back hump and I love the length of this mouse. I just can't handle the width. So I feel like if they could just combine the width of the mini and keep everything else the same, just make it a bit more narrow, this shape would be amazing to me. But I just can't recommend it when there's something that's 10 bucks cheaper, granted like 15 grams heavier, but a much better shape. The other thing too is these clicks are terrible. These clicks suck. This is actually the mouse I was talking about where it's using KL 8.0s, and these are just awful. They're just terrible clicks overall. But yeah, that's pretty much all for my review. I did actually enjoy using these mice a little bit later. I actually prefer the mini much more now, just because I'm able to relax my grip, which is something that I only picked up after using the Death Adder V3. I started to relax and tilt my claw a lot more. So it's just not as comfortable on a mouse that is wide but doesn't have enough back hump to really support that width. It feels very awkward. If the back hump was higher and stayed the same width, it would work. But it's like the opposite issue, where the back hump is very small, but it's very wide. So it's just a really awkward grip that I'm forced into, and it's just not very comfortable after long periods of time. Anything past 2 hours, I dislike using this mouse a lot. I typically always end up switching back to the mini because I'm able to relax my grip a lot more, and it doesn't cause as much fatigue. But yeah, that's pretty much all for my review. I think my next review will actually be on the MPC 450 right here, and this is easily the best Cordura pad I've ever used. I have the Dornfinger Cordura pads, and I dislike those compared to the MPC 450. I like this pad. I just really like this pad. It's very, very fast. There's minimal stopping power, and I think that's why I'm enjoying it. I've just been loving speed pads overall recently, and it's pretty weird. But yeah, that's pretty much all for my review, and I'll see you guys in the next upload. Peace.
Once. Go.
EKIA confirmed.
Ah! There's a sniper around you, go out the runaway.
Ready for tasking. Confirmed. Kill confirmed.
Yeah.
Looting. Ready for task.
Request fire mission.
No, the one that chased him in prison.
No
That
shot.
one's wicked.
Yeah, that PO was really wicked.
Our UAV is orbiting the area. Good effect on target.
No shot, bro. I know my comic books.
What's he talking about?
This ain't this nigga that much, and he is not making an ass out of me.
Ready for launch.
Jeez, we're
Friendly
doing
counter
nuts. This
UAV
one.
is online.
Brings a tear to my eye.